Okay, so today I'm going to cover applying a cloth physics to a mesh in Blender, and then parenting other meshes to a vertex group of the eventually of the physics, the mesh with the physics applied to it. There's some intermediary steps, but what we're working towards is basically, let me share my screen. An animation that looks like this. So this is just kind of 50 seconds worth or 50 frames worth. But this kind of jellyfish character has a cloth physics applied to it, and then there's two other objects here. There's like a head mesh and then this kind of neck mesh that were parented to a vertex group on the top of that physics group. All three objects were exported as glTF. All three objects eventually had their kind of animations baked in using a couple different methods. And then they were all brought back into Blender, exported as glTFs separately, and then all brought back into Blender. So it's kind of a complicated process, but the steps, I mean, in aggregate, but the steps themselves are easy enough. We just need to make sure you follow them in the right order. So I'm going to actually start with this kind of from scratch and kind of delete the animation keys off of all of this and then show you the steps to do this. So I'm going to select the neck, and then I've got my dope sheet up here. I'm going to just delete all those keyframes. Same thing on the head, and then same thing on the jellyfish. So first things first, we're going to want to apply the physics to our jellyfish. So in order to test this, I put a plane underneath the jellyfish, and I gave it a collider. So first things first, let's just select the jellyfish. And then under our physics tab, we're going to add a cloth physics. I'm just going to use the default settings for now. And then I'm going to just quickly add a test plane or cube so that we can at least just ensure that the cloth is kind of enacted and engaging. So that's good. Going to be pretty close because I don't want to test too many frames here. And then I'm just going to give it a collider so that now when I select my jellyfish and I play through, and it's going to, for the first 50 frames, it's going to be, saving the cache. So it's going to happen really, really slowly here. After it goes through once, it will happen much faster. So I'll just let that go. Okay, so Blender has calculated out 50 frames of the animation. We can see that the jellyfish is indeed kind of enacting as a soft body with cloth physics. So I'm gonna, first things first, I'm going to export this as an MDD cache file. So if you don't have that export turned on, it's under File, Export, and then it's this lightwave point cache.mdd file. If you don't see it, I don't think it comes turned on automatically. So you just want to go into your preferences and then into add-ons and then search for new, and make sure the import export new tech MDD format is checked. So that'll give you the export options. So I'm going to say file. First things first, let's just save this scene as. So save this scene, and I'm going to do RH physics, parent, and glTF export. And we'll name this 2. And now I'm going to do this. Sorry, now I'm going to do the export. So file export, and it's a light point cache. And then the default settings are fine. I want to make sure it's going into the folder that I expect it to. That's great. I say export. And now I want to import that same. So I'm going to save this scene as, because this is going to clear out my physics data. And if I ever want to go back, I want to make sure that I've got the kind of versioning history, called MDD import. All right, so now I'm going to say file import, that same file format, import the thing I just exported. Blender will have a little sync, and then I can see I have all these keyframes. So let's just play through. Actually, let me delete. So now I should be able to just delete this cloth physics. It should be kind of baked into that cache file. Beautiful. So now these are all keyframes. So they're shape keys associated with this object. If you go in and see, like, the location isn't changing. This is just simply like a keyed, animated and keyframe shape file. The shape of the mesh is now keyed. All right, so now because I'm not actually getting any change of my like location proper, I can't just parent the head and the neck to the mesh in the same way. So I need to parent it actually instead to vertices. And I'm on the top of this jellyfish. So first things first, I need to actually make those vertices. So let's do another file save. And I'm going to, with my jellyfish selected, go down into my object data properties tab. I'm going to make a new vertex group. So press the little plus button, and I'm going to double click and call this like jelly top. And then I can go over back into my 3D viewport and select my jellyfish, press tab. And I'm going to just go ahead and select the very tippy top of those vertices and then say assign. And so now these vertices are associated with this jelly top. I can say deselect, and then with my jelly top selected, if I say select again, it's going to open up the vertice, reselect the vertices. That's just a way to double check to make sure that they are indeed assigned to the jelly top vertex group. All right, I'm going to press tab to get back out of edit mode. And now I can select the head, and under my constraint tab, under my modifier tab, I can select, no, it was actually, sorry, constraint child of, there we go. So under my constraint tab, child of, and then I can select my target object, or, you know, select from this drop-down menu. I want to select the jelly body, and then use the jelly top vertex group. So that's going to kind of change the relative position of my head here. I can try zeroing back out, but that might not get me quite there. 0, 0, 0, 0. Yeah, that's not quite there. All right, so I'm going to have to do some kind of micro adjustments here to the head, and to, even though I've kind of applied the transforms to the jellyfish, it's using kind of, I think, an average of the vertex weights. That's fine. All it means is that we're going to have to realign these the head and the neck after we do the make them children of the vertices. So I'm going to do the same thing for the neck. So apply object constraint, child of, select the jellyfish, and then select the jelly top. Same thing. I'm going to now need to zero out the location, and then kind of just go back and make sure it's like facing the way that I want it to. And this is going to be easier if I go into like a top and a side. So I'm going to press N to delete the object kind of properties window. I can do the same thing, T, to get rid of the tools. So I just have a little bit more real estate here in my side views, and I'm going to drag that dope sheet down a little bit. And then I'm going to zoom in. Actually, first go to view, viewport, right, and then view, viewport, and front. And we'll select both of these objects. Let's see how, I think their origin is the same, so this should work. And we can rotate them together. And rotate them together. And do like make sure that they're a little bit more centered here on the jellyfish themselves. All right, so now they're oriented. And the first thing I probably should have done is just double check something. Yeah, probably check to just play through to make sure that the neck and the head do indeed kind of follow the vertices, and indeed it looks like they are. So they're now parented to the vertices. The jellyfish it is not using the cloth physics anymore. It's using its own keyframe animation. So we basically want to do the same thing for the head and the neck, where we, instead of exporting like a cache of the shape keys, we're going to bake the animation in XYZ animation here into the objects, so that it retains that kind of parenting information, but it isn't really reliant on the constraint, which, you know, we're ultimately going to export for glTFs, and, you know, all of these constraints and modifiers, some of them port in well and some of them don't. So, all right, so we're going to now bake the animation into the head. I'm going to go back into my single plane view, so it's a little less confusing if you're watching. Under object, I'm going to go into animation and then bake action. So I'm going to start on frame 1 and on frame 50. This is just a short test. I'm going to check visual keying, clear constraints, and clear appearance as well, and make sure I've got objects selected. And now I'm going to press OK. And now when I move through it, I can see that my head is indeed kind of moving, still moving with my object, but I no longer have the constraint, the child constraint on the head. It's actually just keyed. So now I want to do the same thing for the neck. So move back to frame 0, object, animation, bake action. All of those same settings should be saved in there, and then they say OK. And that clears out the constraint, adds the keyframe data, and now the whole thing's falling together. Wonderful. So now what I want to do is export all of these objects as glTFs. I tried exporting as a group, didn't, for whatever reason, that didn't seem to work super duper well. So we're going to export these as glTF files independently. So I'm going to save this thing as MDD import and now baked. And I'm going to select head and say file export glTF. I'm going to make sure that it's the glTF embedded. I want to include the selected objects. Transformation Y up by default is good. Geometry, I'm going to apply modifiers, although all modifiers should be applied at this point. And I'm going to uncheck shape keys and skinning, just because that makes animations much bigger than it needs to be. I will need those for the jellyfish export, but not for the head or the neck. All right, so export glTF. And I'm going to do the same thing. Actually, let's test that. So I'm going to say file, import glTF. And let's go into, I should have named this let's do that again. Same settings. I just didn't do a very good job with the nomenclature. So I'm going to say head or animation, head, glTF. And I'll go back and delete that other. Just double check, selected objects, Y-up, geometry, applied modifiers, and animation. File, import, glTF, and then there's my animation for the head, and then it brings in head number 2. So I've got that selected, and when I play through, it's following the rest. I can even kind of turn off the rest of the objects just to ensure that there it is. Great. So I might just undo the import. That was just a test. And now I'm going to export, same thing, same settings for the neck, export that glTF. And we're going to name it animation neck. And I'm going to select the jellyfish body. It has the cache shape keys, but in order to export as a glTF, I'm going to need to change those settings just a little bit. So export glTF, and we're going to name this animation jelly. And then I'm going to export, sorry. I'm trying to do this too fast. Export glTF. So animation jelly, and then I want to make sure the glTF embedded, include selected objects, transform the default Y-up, geometry, apply modifiers is checked. And then animation, I'm going to check the shape keys and skinning. I don't think I need the skinning, but neither here nor there, it works. So we'll use animation jelly. So export, and it will overwrite the one that I just kind of clicked through too quickly. So it's going to take a little bit longer. There's more data in there with those kind of additional shape keys. In particular, it's a much bigger file. Okay. So now I'm going to say, I'm going to open a new Blender file. And I don't need to save since the last time I did. Select all, X to delete all. And I'm going to import the glTF files that I just exported. So I've got this, that's the one I should have deleted, but let's just grab those 3. And there we go. So let's go into our kind of stop at 50. And there we go. So they're all falling together, the head, the neck, and the body. Now I'm going to try exporting all of these 3 together as one glTF, kind of going through multiple passes of kind of clearing out the Blender specific constraints in physics and kind of trying as much as possible to kind of make consistent the keyframing so that now when I export these all together, hopefully, fingers crossed, they come in as one glTF file with the animations as expected. So for this one, I'm going to say export glTF and use the same settings that I just used for the jellyfish. So let's include the selected objects. Actually, let's include all visible objects. Or let's actually, yeah, I've deleted everything else. So let's just by default, let's not turn anything off. These are the only objects in the scene. That's what I want. The Y-up, the geometry. I don't have any modifiers on this, so I'm not going to click apply modifiers. And then I want to make sure I've got animation, shape keys, and skinning. So we're going to say export glTF, and I'm going to name this Annie, all. And that looks great. Let's test that out. File new general, don't save. A, select all, X to delete, and then let's try importing that glTF with all three of those. And yeah, it still didn't take. So I'm not sure exactly what's going on and why, but for your purposes, what I would suggest is that you end up just exporting yeah, it's so strange. I recommend just exporting as separate models. Not exactly sure why the yeah, the keyframes aren't coming in for the head and the neck, although they import fine into, separately. So follow basically all of these instructions until we get into the separate glTF exports, and then you'll probably just need to import the separate, the animation separately into New York City is what I'm going to recommend. Okay, I hope this was useful, and let me know if you need additional help. Okay, take care.